There's no specific person that I can call out to you, but it's the regular way that we move forward through the regular channels. I don't have a specific person, but that's kind of how it goes on any issue, not just this one. It goes through regular channels, and senior White House staff usually brief him on different issues.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. The speech tonight wasn't on the schedule originally when the day began. Was there something specific that prompted the president to want to speak tonight? Was it the shooting yesterday in Tulsa, or was he trying to say remarks before he went out of town for a couple of days?
No, the president has been wanting to have an opportunity to speak to the American people about this epidemic that we're seeing with gun violence. He wanted to make sure that, again, there was space for negotiations, giving space in Congress to the folks who are leading that conversation, and he just felt tonight was the right time to do that. But he had been wanting to make these to have this
clarify,
speech.
I know you haven't disclosed exactly what he's going to say tonight that he wants out of legislation from Congress, but is he going to specify exactly?
No, but he has. I mean,
okay, so
but he has.
So
yeah. I mean,
what he talks about tonight?
Well, I'm just saying that he has laid out what he wants from Congress. He's been very clear. He did that at the State of the Union most recently. He did that during his comments when we talked about the executive actions for gun violence to reform to comprehensive gun violence recently during the Rose Garden, his first joint Congress address to Congress. So he's done it many times, calling for Congress to act, and he's listed it out. Because he wants to make sure that his voice is still out there, and that the American people know that he's fighting for them and speaking for them. So this is, as we have said many times, this is a priority for the president, and so this is what we're going to see this evening. That's why we're doing it at this time.
Corinne, so continuing on that topic, I'm still a little confused. So on the one hand, you've said that he supports and wants an assault weapons ban, universal background checks, and red flag laws. That's not the conversation that's largely going on up on the Hill. The Hill, to the extent that there are discussions, members on both sides have said they are not engaged in active negotiations over an assault weapons ban or universal background checks. It is much more modest than that. So I guess the question that we're all asking is he going to, and I think you used the word renew at the beginning, is he going to repeat his demand that Congress pass a universal background check bill, a ban on assault weapons and red flag laws, or is he going to lend his voice to the more modest gun control efforts that are actually underway on Capitol Hill? Those are two different things, and I don't know that you can do both at the same time, or maybe you can do one and say, but if that doesn't happen, I'm happy with the other one.
I guess we think we can do both at the same time, right? The president has been very clear in laying out his key priorities. He has done that for a year and a half. Expand background checks to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Renew our ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazine. Pass a red flag law, which, by the way, is being talked about, right, in Congress. Confirm Steve Dettelbach to lead ATF. That is something that we have talked about, and Congress is dealing with that, and we are very optimistic that he will be confirmed. So those are just listed out a couple of things that are very much a reality. Look, the president has been very clear. Congress needs to act. They should pass legislation so president can sign it into law. We are seeing something right now that is encouraging. The process is still happening. Negotiation is still happening. We do not know what it's ultimately going to look like, but that doesn't mean that the president can't call out his key priorities. That doesn't mean that the president can't list out what he thinks is needs to happen so that we can actually deal with this epidemic.
So we should expect him to repeat that demand.
He's repeated many times. I think. What I'm saying is I don't want to get ahead of what the president. No, but no, I haven't. I said he's going to call Congress into action. He has talked about these things over and over and over again. The president is going to speak for himself. That is all. We've said this before. When you guys have asked us, can you please give us a preview on the speech? Many times we say, we want the president to speak for himself. That is not new. That is not new here. That is exactly what I'm saying. But you know his key priorities. He's been talking about them. Okay.
I just have a question more here on strategy. You said the past couple of days that the president wanted to give space for Congress to work through the negotiations on their own, and that he would only get involved when he felt it would be helpful. Tonight he's giving a speech in prime time. Yeah. Does he think it's now time for him to be helpful in these negotiations, or is there a risk that his insertion into this moment could be potentially counterproductive and hurt the ongoing negotiations that don't seem to be finalized
Look,
yet?
it's a good question. Our Office of Ledge Affairs has been in close consultation with the negotiators on the Hill. So they were aware that the president's going to give these remarks. We talked to them. We had consultation with them. We consulted with them about giving these remarks. So that is not an issue. That is not a problem. The president wanted to make sure that the American people heard from him directly. This is a speech that he has been wanting to make, and that's what he's going to do this evening.
And so there is a careful consideration here about what he might say to not interfere with any
No, I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the president's going to use this opportunity to speak directly to the American people. That's what he's going to do tonight.
And just one more on baby formula. I know you got a lot of questions about this yesterday. I'm wondering if you had an opportunity to speak with the president since his comments yesterday when he said he was not informed about the situation until May. Has he expressed any disappointment in his staff for not bringing this issue to him earlier? Are there any concerns about the information flow in the White House that, given the manufacturers told him very directly they knew this would be a problem in February and he didn't know about it until months later? Has he expressed concern about that gap and how that squares with the whole of government approach you outlined yesterday?
So just so that we take a little bit of a step back, Abbott is a major manufacturer and has been clear to the American people that they had shortcomings. They made that clear very, very recently. The FDA administrator has spoken to this as well. He said the FDA moved too slow and has asked Steve Solomon to lead a review into what happened. The White House took urgent actions as it became clear a shortage emerged and existing actions were not sufficing. It's hard to understand the scales of actions. DPA at a historical pace, Operation Fly Formula expediting timelines for millions of bottles from 3 to 4 weeks to 72 hours. These are incredibly important of what we were able to do. And 80 million safe bottles being imported and counting. We understand that there's more work to be done. We understand what families are feeling, but we have to remember how this started. We have to also remember what the FDA administrator said as well. He has spoken to this, and so this is something that we're going to continue to work on.
Right, but that doesn't answer the question about when the president was informed and whether or not he is satisfied with the staff not telling him about what has become a major problem.
Well, he spoke to when he was informed. He spoke to that yesterday, which was in April. And you're asking me about the process and is he disappointed? Look, again, I'm telling you, the administrator of FDA spoke to this. They moved too slowly. He said that Steve Solomon is going to lead an after-action review on what happened. And when the shortages emerged and actions by the FDA and USDA did not suffice to prevent any consumer impact, the White House led urgent emergency administrative-wide action with FDA, Fly Formula, as I just mentioned.
But that's the FDA administrator, that's not the president. Those are two different
No, but I'm telling you the process. I'm telling you what happened. I'm telling you that the FDA moved too slowly. I'm telling you that this happened on the side of Abbott. And what FDA tried to do at first was they called out Abbott for safety concerns, right? The most important thing here is that we have to make sure that babies have safe formula. We have to make sure that American families feel comfortable. So FDA did their part here, but he also admitted that they moved too slowly. And once we saw that the supplies were not meeting the demand, we acted. We took urgent action. So that is the way that it happened. That is the way the timeline was laid out, and so that is. You may not like my answer, but that is the way that we see it in answering your question there. Go ahead.
Is the president expecting his audience tonight should include those negotiators who are working on, members of Congress who are working on this? Is he directly trying to speak to them, or are you saying his audience is the broader public?
I think, look, I think the speech that he's making, yes, it's to the American public. Why we're making sure that we're having it this evening so they can hear directly to the American people. But it's also a call to action to Congress as well. You know, but again, we have been in constant communication. Dozens of calls have been made with members in Congress, including negotiators from the Office of Leg Affairs, and that has been happening for the past couple of weeks. So we have been communicating with them and making sure that we get a sense of what's happening and how we can be helpful.
And have you read the remarks yet? Have you seen the president's text?
I've seen draft of the remarks, but again, this is for the president to speak to. I do not want to get ahead of what he's going to share with the American public and what message he wants to send.
I think following up on what Michael says, I'm trying to get a sense if the president is trying to help close a deal and get something accomplished with Congress, or if he's going to restate what he could say on any day, a position he's held for decades, or if he's trying to get this moment to produce a legislative result. Because really nobody's talking about banning assault weapons on Capitol Hill at the moment. So is he going to speak more to the specific elements that they are currently negotiating?
So when it comes to right now, as you all are asking me, look, the president has defeated the gun lobby before. He's the one who was able to pass assault weapons ban and who was able to help shepherd the legislation that put in place the federal system of background checks. So he understands how this process works. The president is continuing to press Congress to act, and he's giving them the room they need to find common ground, but he can still speak to this and speak to the American people. But as we have said, the president is going to continue to stay closely engaged on this, to speak out, and he's going to use his bully pulpit, which is what he's doing this evening, to press for action, just as he's done throughout his presidency. Just as he's done at the State of the Union earlier this year, just as he's done when he did his first joint address to Congress, and he's done this many times. And so this is just another opportunity to use the bully pulpit to talk about the actions that he wants to see, and also just talk directly to the American people. He thinks this is an important moment to do that.
Can we ask you to go back on the issue of who briefed the president on baby formula? To say there is no specific person is not a satisfactory answer. When you have senior assistants to the president, there's a paper trail, I'm sure, about briefings to the president. There's a domestic policy council. There's a chief of staff. At some point, we need to know who would have been the most likely person to talk to him.
I think what I'm trying to say, there's so many issues that come up that is presented to the president. As you know, you've covered many administrations, and there are just regular channels that happen that go to the president.
It just looks like it's evasive to not have the most senior people in the White House willing to say, I had a conversation with the president about it, or we talked about it in this context or that context. And we're also all reporting on the consumer side of it, of what you're doing, putting out and trying to get information. But we're also trying to understand the information flow in this White House, and it's important for us to get that answer, which is why we're going to keep asking it until we get that answer.
No, you have every right to keep asking. That's why I'm here. Look, really, Kellyo, he's briefed on countless priorities. He is the President of the United States. There are regular channels. He is briefed by his senior White House staff, and that is just the process that we have.
Chief of Staff, then?
I'm not going to confirm who it was. I'm just letting you know that there are regular channels that we use, and you know, it's senior White House staff that elevate issues to him when the time comes, and they're just regular channels. And that's what I have for you to share there. Yeah.
Thanks, Corinne.
Yep.
If the president thinks that Congress must act immediately to end this epidemic of gun violence, is he going to bring any of the key players from Capitol Hill to the beach with him tonight?
Oh, okay. So I don't have.
Wasn't a big part of candidate Biden's whole thing that he knows how to get things done.
He does. He does. I mean, he's beaten the gun lobby before. He has.
Then why not invite these lawmakers who maybe haven't beat the gun lobby and say this is how it's done?
But it's not his thing. It's actually fact. We saw he did that in the Senate during his Congress days, that he beat the gun lobby.
Look, I agree that he has a lot of legislative experience. I'm asking why it is that you can say he wants to give these negotiations.
Do you want to go to the beach with the president tonight? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I would love to.
Look, I do. Well, that touche on that. The weather, it is pouring outside like cats and dogs. It is not great.
But
Look,
if people are dying every day, why
Absolutely.
would this president then say he wants to give it some space and let somebody else?
But you're also going to hear from the president tonight. And it's not that it's not that he hasn't been involved. He has been involved. I just listed out all the speeches that he's made. I just listed out the executive actions that he's taken. But I want to make sure that, that it is very clear that the president has indeed taken action. He cannot do it alone, so he's asking for Congress to act. The American public is going to hear from him tonight. I don't have any meetings to preview or to lay out for it. I'm not telling you it's not going to happen. I'm just saying I don't have anything to preview for you today.
And I get, you don't want to preview anything that's in the text tonight, but what law could anybody, president or anybody else, propose that would guarantee that somebody who really wants to get their hands on a gun can?
Well, they're having negotiations right now to talk through what the options are. Look, I mentioned the red flags, right? Red flag laws. If enacted, that actually we have seen across the country in different states where it has been helpful. But look, we are going to give them some space to see what they come up with. The president, the most important thing here is the president wants Congress to take action and to act.
But, okay, you got Chicago, for example. They already have plenty of very strict gun laws, some of the strictest in the country. 47 people shot there over the Memorial Day weekend. 9 of them died. So which law would have prevented any of that?
All right, well.
Do we think that all these people in Chicago who are shooting each other are legally buying their guns?
So here's a couple of examples for you. I was just talking about the red flags law. There are some examples here of how they've prevented tragedies. In California, a study showed that California red flag law has assisted in the prevention of 21 mass shootings between 2016 and 2018. Florida, since passing a red flag law in 2018, there have been notable cases of the law intervening in multiple cases of potential violence. In Connecticut and Indiana, for every 10 to 20 preventions under the red flag flag laws, there was one fewer death than would otherwise have been expected. So when it enacted, it does help. There are things that we can do, and one of the things that the president talks about with expanding the background checks, if we're able to do that, we are going to take more guns out of the hands of criminals, and that is incredibly important. So there are things here that can be worked out, that can be done, that is not going to prevent every tragedy, but will take us to a better place so we can protect our families.
Okay, so my last one would be, you guys at the White House had some very hard headlines this week about inflation and about baby formula. If there's nothing new that you can point to in this speech tonight, did you just schedule it to get people talking about something else?
People have died. People have died in the past couple of weeks in particular. We had 19 kids die in Uvalde just recently. A mass shooter came into their classroom and killed them, plus their 2 teachers. We had people doing everyday things on a Saturday, like some of us do, go to the grocery store, and 10 of them were murdered. Just last night in Tulsa, we're learning of people who were, again, killed. So this is not about politics. This is not about partisan politics here. This is something that he has worked on since he was a senator. This is very important and real for the president and for the grieving families that he has met with, sadly, in the last 2 weeks. So this is an opportunity, again, to call for action, to get Congress to move. And, you know, it is disheartening to hear that this could potentially, or if I'm hearing this right, could be used as a political tool, and that's not what this is. This is not about person. This is about people's lives.
Corinne, what's the president's message to people living in violent neighborhoods
Just
who
to-
can't escape and
Go
can't
ahead,
wait
Ed.
for laws
Go ahead,
to...
Ed.
To follow up on what Kelly was asking about regarding the baby formula shortage, you were asked earlier by a few people, I want to just ask this again with all due respect.
Yeah.
Were you able to speak with the president about when he was informed in April?
He talked about it himself. He said he was informed in April. So I don't think I need to, the president mentioned that, he said that, so I don't need to clear that up. You heard directly from the president on that.
I asked it at least is you talked yesterday about February 17th and February 18th. And what we were trying to figure out is when exactly in April was he told? Was it April 1? Was it April 30th? Was it April 15th? Somewhere else in there?
I don't have a date to share with you. What I can tell you is he spoke to this yesterday, and he said it was in April. So that matters.
Take it down a level from him
Okay.
into the staff of the White House. And part of the reason there's so much curiosity about this across town is because, as you know, there have been stories written over the last several days and weeks about how things are going here in the West Wing, how things are operating. And so when we ask who was told either by the FDA or the Department of Health and Human Services or the USDA here in the West Wing, who was told first? How did that get from that person eventually to the president? As completely understandable. There are thousands of things going on across the federal government
there
today.
are thousands of
But
things.
here's the issue.
We were just talking about gun
Something
violence.
else could prop up suddenly as an unforeseen crisis, like this one. And so we're trying to get a sense of how do things operate here inside the West Wing and how they eventually rise to the level of presidential involvement that then lead to things like invoking the Defense Production Act 4 or 5 months after the initial flags were raised.
So, Ed, the president was briefed through his regular channels, as he is briefed on countless priorities that the President of the United States has to deal with. There are countless issues, countless priorities that I talk about here all the time, every day, about different priorities that we have to deal with, whether it's the economy, whether it's COVID, whether it's climate change, whether it's foreign policy issues that we have to deal with and assess. That is how we run the White House. That's how any White House is run. So there are regular channels of White House senior staff, and that's how it gets elevated. You're asking me for a specific name. I am telling you how the process works, and I'm telling you how it goes from White House staff to regular channels to the president.
Part of why this is intriguing is because we know from what you've said, from what your colleagues have told us, from what we've learned in our reporting over the last year and a half, is that he's a voracious consumer of information from across the federal government, and whenever he gets briefed on something like this, he asks a lot of questions. And he usually puts it to the staff to come back with him with some solutions, or some answers to these questions. So the idea that he was told about this in April, and then it didn't get elevated until mid-May, when Congress and when the press started raising bigger questions about this, begs the question of, well, then what happened in April when this very curious, very detail-oriented president in briefings would have been told about it, and when steps were taken that are now underway. That's part of what is so intriguing and curious about this situation, and why we're so desperate for information, because normally in these situations we're told, oh, well, here's what he wanted to know, and here's who he tasked with doing it. But we're not getting that this time.
No, look, we've laid out timelines over and over again.
Well, you gave us 2 dates.
Well,
And then tell us generally in April he was told about it.
okay, so by late, let me try again. Let's try this again. By late in April, sales were going down and shortages were appearing. So that is what we learned in late April. And since then, through May, across the administration, we've aggressively invoked the DPA and used it 3 times, as you just mentioned, and that's because of the president's leadership. Launched Operation Fly Formula, again, because of the president's leadership. Secured 80 million safe infant formula bottles from other countries, and cut red tape and issued WIC waivers in all 50 states. Because that's what happened in April that triggered our involvement in the way that we did throughout May in doing these 4 very specific things. Look, USDA, they took immediate action. But USDA and FDA cut red tape and increased supply. A reminder, there was more supply on the market after the recall than prior. That didn't happen by accident. So these actions were designed to bridge demand while Abbott worked through its safely open and manufacture a product that met FDA's gold standard. So they were acting at USDA, FDA were acting from the moment that the recall happened. But again, the sales were going down and shortages were appearing in late April, and that's when
That's what he was told?
well, he said in late April, right? And this is
He said April.
in April. I'm sorry, in April. Okay, he said in April, in early April. The point that I'm making is what we started to see in April were sales were going down and shortages were appearing. And when that happened, we triggered, the president made sure that the DPA happened, the Operation Fly Formula happened, and that was our focus there. And we wanted to make sure we got as much supply out as possible because, again, we saw the sales were going down.
Real quick on some of the Americas, I know you said the invite list is coming, there's still some time left. Countries that have been invited, whoever they are, and we'll find out about that later, have they been told what's on the agenda for that summit next week?
So,
do they know why they should come to Los Angeles?
We're still giving our partners time to decide. So to answer that question, but as you see from press reports, there have been quite a few heads of states who have confirmed via their own announcement. But again, I always bring this back because what's really important is about next week is that the people from around the region are gathering together to address the core challenges facing the people of the hemisphere, right, including economic prosperity, climate change, migration crisis, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So there is an array of issues for the region that we are going to discuss. These are priorities. These are incredibly important, and that's what you're going to see for next week. And others will confirm if they're attending. We're not going to do that until we have a final list and give our partners opportunities to decide.
You're right, your time. So you're going to wrap.
Oh, my
Final
gosh.
question.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Karine, the jobs report's going to come out tomorrow morning. The ADP report that came out came in much lower than what economists had projected. Are you guys expecting a less than optimal jobs report tomorrow? And usually the president speaks on the economy on jobs day. Is he going to do that even though he's going to be in Delaware?
So I don't have anything. We don't have anything to preview for you for tomorrow. Our day ahead or daily guidance is going to be coming out in a couple of hours. I don't have an estimate for you and haven't seen the numbers as clearly. But what we can say is that as we transition to this new period of stable, steady growth, We aren't looking to see blockbuster job reports month after month like we have over the last year, but that's a good thing. That's the sign of a healthy economy with steady job growth, rising wages for working Americans, everyday cost easing up, and a shrinking deficit. That stability will put us in a strong position to tackle inflation. And in the short time since President Biden came into office, we have had record job numbers, record job creation, I should say. The unemployment rate is near historic lows, and the number of Americans on unemployment benefits is down from record highs to this historic lows. And that's something that's really important that we want to make sure that the American people know what we've been doing. Okay, but we're gonna go. We're gonna go. It's 4 o'clock. Thanks, guys.
Like the bombs?
Morning, everyone. With today's excellent jobs report and unemployment remaining at near historic lows of 3.6%, I want to speak very about our economy and what we're doing to lower the cost for American families. I know that even with today's good news, a lot of Americans remain anxious, and I understand the feeling. I grew up in a family about 100 miles from here that where the price of gas went up, you felt it. It was a discussion at the kitchen table. And there's no denying that high prices, particularly around gasoline and food, are a real problem for people. But there's every reason for the American people to feel confident that we'll meet these challenges. Because of the enormous progress we've made on the economy, the Americans can tackle inflation from a position of strength. Still a problem. We can tackle it from a position of strength. The purpose that we've set out to accomplish and the progress we've made, I think, is critical. At the time I took office, about 16 months ago, the economy had stalled and COVID was out of control. Today, thanks to the economic plan and the vaccination plan that my administration put in action, America has achieved the most robust recovery in modern history, just 2 years removed from the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The job market is the strongest it's been since just after World War II. We've got more evidence of that today. We learned that in May the economy 80,000 new jobs, bringing the total since I took office to 8.7 million new jobs, an all-time record. We learned that more Americans entered the labor force in May. In fact, working-age people have come back into the workforce at a faster rate in this recovery than at any point in the last 40 years. That means that the unemployment rate is near historic lows, and the number of Americans on unemployment benefits has gone from record highs to record lows, with millions of Americans moving up to better jobs with better pay. And American manufacturing is booming. 600,000 new manufacturing jobs created since I took office. But it isn't only about jobs. Since I took office, families are carrying less debt. Their average savings are up. A recent survey from the Federal Reserve found that more Americans feel financially comfortable than any time since the survey began in 2013. That confidence and comfortability is part of the reason why Americans applied to start more new small businesses last year than ever before in American history. And because of our historically strong growth, we have strengthened Medicare and Social Security programs that millions of American families rely on. Yesterday, I learned that Social Security and Medicare trust funds will be able to pay benefits for longer than previously projected before we pass the American Rescue Plan. The reason? A faster than expected recovery in jobs, earnings, economic growth. It's all strengthened the financial prospects for these bedrock programs. In fact, America is in a stronger economic position today than just about any other country in the world. Independent experts have projected that the U.S. economy could grow faster than China's economy this year. That hasn't happened since 1976, nearly one half century ago. The point is this: we've laid an economic foundation that's historically strong, and now we're moving forward to a new moment where we can build on that foundation, build a future of stable, steady growth, so we can bring down inflation without sacrificing all the historic gains we've made. And that's what we're beginning to see in today's jobs report. With today's numbers, the jobs over the last 3 months have averaged about 400,000 jobs per month. That's historically robust and a sign we're beginning to shift to steady growth after rapidly recovering 600,000 jobs per month over the prior 6 months. And as we move to a new period of stable, steady growth, we should expect to see more moderation. We aren't likely to see the kind of blockbuster job reports month after month like we had over this past year. But that's a good thing. That's a sign of a healthy economy with steady growth, rising wages for working families, everyday costs easing up, and shrinking the deficit. That stability puts us in a strong position to tackle what is clearly a problem, inflation. I've been very clear that fighting inflation is my top economic priority. On Tuesday, I spoke about one element of my inflation plan, giving the Federal Reserve the space they need to operate. Today, I'd like to address the two additional elements of my plan to tackle inflation. One, bringing down the cost of everyday goods for families. And two, bringing down the federal deficit at the same time. Bringing down the cost, here's where we stand. The two challenges on the minds of most working families are prices at the pump and prices at the grocery store. Both of these challenges have been directly exacerbated by Putin's war in Ukraine. The price of gas is up $1.40 since the beginning of the year, when Putin began amassing troops at the Ukrainian border. This is a Putin price hike. Putin's war has raised the price of food because Ukraine and Russia are two of the world's major breadbaskets for wheat and corn, the basic product for so many foods around the world. Ukraine has 20 million tons of grain in storage right now, and it's been in storage since the last harvest. Normally, that would have already been exported into the world market. But because of Putin's invasion and blockade of the port on which they could take that grain out for the rest of the world, it's not. It's not. And look, I understand that families who are struggling probably don't care why the prices are up. They just want them to go down. Joe, what are you going to do to bring them down? But it's important that we understand the root of the problem so we can take steps to solve it. I've been up front with the American people from the outset that there would be a cost here at home of Putin's decision to brutally and savagely invade a sovereign nation. But as your president, I remain committed to doing everything in my power to blunt the impact on American families. That's exactly what I'm doing. I led the world to coordinate the largest release of global oil reserves in history, 240 million barrels, to boost global supply and keep prices from rising even more. I directed the sale of gasoline using homegrown biofuels this summer, and I'm working closely with our European partners to get more of the grain locked in Ukraine right now out into the world market which could help bring down prices. There's ways to do that over land, which we could talk about at another time. But actions have already helped to blunt that what would have been an even larger Putin price hike. As I said, I'm going to continue to use every tool available to me to further blunt those price hikes as we move forward. But the fact is this, there's more than one way to solve this problem. If food and gas prices are going to be elevated by Putin's price hike, one way we can make things a little better for families is by helping them save on other basic items their family needs on a monthly basis, like their utility bills, their internet bills, their prescription drug bills, and other costs like housing. My goal is to make sure that at the end of the month, families have a little more breathing room than they have now. For example, here's something we can do right now. Congress could help ease the cost for families right away by passing my clean energy investment proposal that I proposed. It's been sitting there. Things like tax credits for businesses to produce clean energy, the tax cuts for families to make their homes more energy efficient. That's what it results in. I met with nearly a dozen CEOs of America's largest utility companies, such as Southern Company and American Electric Power. They told me that if we pass the investments, they'll immediately lower the average family's energy cost by about $500 a year. That would help a lot. That'd make up for a lot. In the long run, it would help families make America truly energy independent. So in the future, American families are no longer subject to the whims of a dictator, half a world away controlling oil. It's not just utility bills, though. Lower prescription drug cost by giving Medicare the power to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies and how much they can charge, just like they do with the Veterans Administration. Right now, more than X amount of dollars for your insulin. Well, they can decide not to sell it at all, or they can sell it at the price that the government says they'll pay for it. Bringing down the average cost of prescription drugs by capping that cost of insulin, by the way, at no more than $35 a month. It costs them less than $10 to make it. And in some families, it means hundreds of dollars a month, and sometimes hundreds of dollars a year, depending on what ailment they're trying to deal with. Someone with diabetes, for example, it's hundreds of dollars per year. Someone with arthritis, it could be thousands of dollars per year. I've laid out a plan to lower rent and mortgage costs, the largest cost most families face, around a third of a typical family's budget, because we have a shortage of housing. Building more than 1 million more housing units and closing the shortfall in affordable housing in this country will do that. I've laid out a plan to lower the cost of high-speed internet by working with the 20 leading internet service providers to cut their prices and raise their speeds for tens of millions of households. This could lower what they have to pay for high-speed internet by $50 a month or more. And nearly 40% of households in America qualify for these savings. And by the way, you can find out if you'd be eligible by visiting getinternet.gov. Getinternet.gov. Say it again, getinternet.gov. See if you qualify. I've laid out a plan to lower the cost of everyday goods that move through our supply chains to stores and families' doorsteps. For example, at the State of the Union, I called on Congress to crack down on foreign-owned shipping companies that have raised their prices to transport goods by as much as 1,000%. 1,000%. And that obviously raises the cost of the goods on those ships to consumers. The Senate has passed legislation, and I'm hopeful the House can do the same to send me legislation in the coming weeks to crack down on these companies and help lower overall cost. And my plan does all this without raising a penny in taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year, and without raising the deficit at all by taxing the super wealthy and big corporations, like the 55 major corporations that don't pay a single penny in taxes, even though they had a $40 billion in profits. The point is this. I'm doing everything I can on my own to help working families during this stretch of higher prices. I'm going to continue to do that. But Congress needs to act as well. We can do so much more if we come together to lower the cost for American families. But my congressional Republican friends, led by Rick Scott, have a different approach. He's actually introduced a plan. He wants to raise taxes on working families by an average of $1,500 a year, put Medicare and Social Security, Medicaid, Social Security and Medicaid on the chopping block every 5 years. In other words, every 5 years they're going to no longer exist unless they vote them back into existence. I disagree with that. What in God's name are they doing? I'm going to work with anyone, Democrat, Republican, Independent, to deliver real solutions and real savings for the American people, not take money out of their pockets. Now, the other element I'd like to address that has impacts on inflation is to lower the deficit. The reason this matters to families is because reducing the deficit is another way to ease inflation. My friends on the Republican side like to paint me as the big spender. But let's look at the facts. Facts matter. Under my predecessor, the deficit exploded, rising every single year he was in office. Under my plan, we're on track to cut the federal deficit this year by $1.7 trillion. Hear me now? This year by $1.7 trillion. That's a fact. The largest decline in American history. And by the way, those aren't White House projections. They come from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office that you and the press and everybody around the country legitimately quotes all the time. That progress on tackling the deficit was not preordained. It was my economic strategy, built into our historic recovery, that we didn't anticipate a war in Ukraine at the time. Historic economic growth that not only helped tens of millions of families move up, it has helped our federal deficit come down. And now because of that strategy, we're on track for a deficit to take up a lower share of our economy than it did before the pandemic. In fact, the Treasury Department is planning to pay down the national debt this quarter, which never happened under my predecessor. Not once. Not once. Because unlike my predecessor, the deficit has come down both years I've been here. I propose a plan to keep shrinking that deficit by making common sense reforms to our tax code, leveling the playing field internationally so that the biggest companies no longer have an incentive to shift them overseas to make their product because they get charged less in taxes and avoid paying their fair share of taxes here at home. We put together a multi-nation initiative that I'm hopeful will come into play at the G7. And ending the outrageous unfairness of our tax system allows billionaires. Look, if you can make $1 billion, I'm all for it. Just pay a little bit of your fair share, you know? Just pay your fair share. Billionaires pay a lower rate than a teacher or a firefighter. The bottom line is this. Part of the reason I ran for president is because I was tired of trickle-down economics. It doesn't work. My plans are to produce the strongest, fastest, most widespread economic recovery America has ever experienced, with record jobs, new record small businesses, and wages rising. It's the foundation for an economy that works for working families. Because of that foundation, we're better positioned than any country in the world to overcome global inflation that we're seeing and reach a new chapter of stable and steady growth. So let's come together and focus on what matters. Let's build on the extraordinary progress we've made. Let's continue to build this economy from the bottom up and the middle out. When that happens, everybody does well, including the very wealthy. Thank you, and God bless you, and may God protect our troops. I'll take a few questions.
Are you going to Saudi Arabia, Mr. President? Are you going to Saudi Arabia?
Elon Musk has said that he has a super bad feeling about the U.S. economy. He's laying off 10%. What do you say to Elon Musk about his feeling about the economy? Jamie Dimon has said similar things.
Well, let me tell you, while Elon Musk is talking about that, Ford is increasing their investment overwhelmingly. I think Ford is increasing the investment in building new electric vehicles, 6,000 new employees, union employees, I might add, in the Midwest. The former Chrysler Corporation, Stellantis, they are also making similar investments in electric vehicles. Intel is adding 20,000 new jobs for making computer chips. You know, lots of luck on this trip to the moon. I mean, you know.
Mr. President, are you going to go to Saudi Arabia, Mr. President?
I'm not sure whether I'm going. I have no direct plans at the moment, but let me tell you that I have been engaged in trying to work with how we can bring more stability and peace in the Middle East. And there is a possibility that I would be going to meet with both the Israelis and some Arab countries at the time, including, I expect, would be Saudi Arabia would be included in that if I did go. But I have no direct plans at the moment. We're
Is the
looking at
kingdom still a pariah in your eyes?
Look, I'm not going to change my view on human rights, but as President of the United States, my job is to bring peace if I can. Peace if I can. And that's what I'm going to try to do.
Mr. President, will you be open to meeting with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman if you do end up going to Saudi Arabia?
Look, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. What I want to do is see to it that we diminish the likelihood that there's a continuation of some of the senseless wars between Israel and the Arab nations. And that's what I'm focused on.
Is OPEC doing enough on oil production?
Well, what I recently read is talking to my team that they acknowledge that there is an oil shortage, and they have made an announcement of late that they're going to increase production. So I don't know enough to know whether it's enough, but I know it's positive.
Mr. President, does Ukraine have to cede territory to achieve some peace?
You know, you've been always fair with me. From the beginning, I've said, and not everyone's agreed with me, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. It's their territory. I'm not going to tell them what they should and shouldn't do. But it appears to me that at some point along the line, there's a settlement here. And what that entails, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows at the time. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to put the Ukrainians in a position where they can defend themselves. Thank you all so very much.
Will you go to the Hill next week on guns, new lawmakers?
My staff has been dealing constantly with On Memorial Day this past Monday, Jill and I visited Arlington National Cemetery. As we entered those hallowed grounds, we saw rows and rows of crosses among the rows of headstones with other emblems of belief, honoring those who paid the ultimate price on battlefields around the world. The day before, we visited Uvalde, Texas. In front of Robb Elementary School, we stood before 21 crosses for 19 third and fourth graders and 2 teachers. On each cross, a name. And nearby, a photo of each victim that Jill and I reached out to touch. Innocent victims murdered in a classroom that have been turned into a killing field. Standing there in that small town, like so many other communities across America, I couldn't help but think there are too many other schools, too many other everyday places that have become killing fields, battlefields here in America. We stood at such a place just 12 days before, across from a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, memorializing 10 fellow Americans, a spouse, a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, gone forever. At both places, we spent hours with hundreds of family members who were broken, whose lives will never be the same. They had one message for all of us: do something. Just do something. For God's sake, do something. After Columbine, after Sandy Hook, after Charleston, after Orlando, after Las Vegas, after Parkland, nothing has been done. This time that can't be true. This time we must actually do something. The issue we face is one of conscience and common sense. For so many of you at home, I want to be very clear. This is not about taking away anyone's guns. It's not about vilifying gun owners. In fact, we believe we should be treating responsible gun owners as an example of how every gun owner should behave. I respect the culture and the tradition and the concerns of lawful gun owners. At the same time, the Second Amendment, like all other rights, is not absolute. It was Justice Scalia who wrote, and I quote, "Like most rights, the rights granted by the Second Amendment are not unlimited." Not unlimited. It never has been. There have always been limitations on what weapons you can own in America. For example, machine guns have been federally regulated for nearly 90 years, and this is still a free country. This isn't about taking away anyone's rights. It's about protecting children. It's about protecting families. It's about protecting whole communities. It's about protecting our freedom to go to school, to a grocery store, to a church, without being shot and killed. According to new data just released by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, guns are the #1 killer of children in the United States of America. The #1 killer. More than car accidents, more than cancer. Over the last 2 decades, more school-age children have died from guns than on-duty police officers and active-duty military combined. Think about that. More kids than on-duty cops killed by guns. More kids than soldiers killed by guns. For God's sake, how much more carnage are we willing to accept? How many more innocent American lives must be taken before we say enough, enough? I know that we can't prevent every tragedy, but here's what I believe we have to do. Here's what the overwhelming majority of American people believe we must do. Here's what the families in Buffalo and Uvalde in Texas told us we must do. We need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And if we can't ban assault weapons, then we should raise the age to purchase them from 18 to 21. Strengthen background checks. Enact safe storage law and red flag laws. Repeal the immunity that protects gun manufacturers from liability. Address the mental health crisis, deepening the trauma of gun violence and as a consequence of that violence. These are rational, common sense measures. Here's what it all means. It all means this. We should reinstate the assault weapons ban on high-capacity magazines that we passed in 1994 with bipartisan support in Congress and the support of law enforcement. 9 categories of semi-automatic weapons were included in that ban, like AK-47s and AR-15s. And in the 10 years it was law, mass shootings went down. But after Republicans let the law expire in 2004, and those weapons were allowed to be sold again, mass shootings tripled. Those are the facts. A few years ago, the family of the inventor of the AR-15 said he would have been horrified to know that its design was being used to slaughter children and other innocent lives instead of being used as a military weapon on the battlefields, as it was designed. That's what it was designed for. Enough. Enough. We should limit how many rounds a weapon can hold. Why, in God's name, should an ordinary citizen be able to purchase an assault weapon that holds 30-round magazines that let mass shooters fire hundreds of bullets in a matter of minutes? The damage was so devastating in Uvalde, parents had to do DNA swabs to identify the remains of their children. 9 and 10-year-old children. Enough. We should expand background checks to keep guns out of the hands of felons, fugitives, and those under restraining orders. Stronger background checks are something that the vast majority of Americans, including the majority of gun owners, agree on. I also believe we should have safe storage laws and personal liability for not locking up your gun. The shooter in Sandy Hook came from a home full of guns. They were too easy to access. That's how he got the weapons. The weapon he used to kill his mother and then murdered 26 people, including 20 first graders. If you own a weapon, you have a responsibility to secure it. Every responsible gun owner agrees to make sure no one else can have access to it, to lock it up, to have trigger locks. And if you don't, and something bad happens, you should be held responsible. We should also have national red flag laws so that a parent, a teacher, a counselor can flag for a court that a child, a student, a patient is exhibiting violent tendencies, threatening classmates, or experiencing suicidal thoughts that makes them a danger to themselves or to others. 19 states in the District of Columbia have red flag laws. The Delaware law is named after my son, Attorney General Beau Biden. Fort Hood, Texas, 2009, 13 dead and more than 30 injured. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, 2018, 17 dead, 17 injured. In both places, countless others suffering with invisible wounds. Red flag laws could have stopped both these shooters. In Uvalde, the shooter was 17 when he asked his sister to buy him an assault weapon. Knowing he'd be denied because he was too young to purchase one himself, she refused. But as soon as he turned 18, he purchased 2 assault weapons for himself. Because in Texas, you can be 18 years old and buy an assault weapon, even though you can't buy a pistol in Texas until you're 21. If we can't ban assault weapons, as we should, we must at least raise the age to be able to purchase one to 21. Look, I know some folks will say 18-year-olds can serve in the military and fire those weapons. But that's with training and supervision by the best trained experts in the world. Don't tell me raising the age won't make a difference. Enough. We should repeal the liability shield that often protects gun manufacturers from being sued for the death and destruction caused by their weapons. They're the only industry in this country that has that kind of immunity. Imagine if the tobacco industry had been immune from being sued, where we'd be today. The gun industry's special protections are outrageous. It must end. And let there be no mistake about the psychological trauma that gun violence leaves behind. Imagine being that little girl, that brave little girl in Uvalde, who smeared blood off her murdered friend's body onto her own face to lie still among the corpses in her classroom and pretend she was dead in order to stay alive. Imagine what it would be like for her to walk down the hallway of any school again. Imagine what it's like for children who experience this kind of trauma every day in school, in the streets, in communities all across America. Imagine what it's like for so many parents to hug their children goodbye in the morning, not sure whether they'll come back home. Unfortunately, too many people don't have to imagine that at all. Even before the pandemic, young people were already hurting. There's a serious youth mental health crisis in this country. We have to do something about it. That's why mental health is the heart of my unity agenda that I laid out in the State of the Union address this year. We must provide more school counselors, more school nurses, more mental health services for students and for teachers, more people volunteering as mentors to help young people succeed, more privacy protection and resources to keep kids safe from the harms of social media. This unity agenda won't fully heal the wounded souls, but it will help. It matters. I just told you what I'd do. The question now is, what will the Congress do? The House of Representatives already passed key measures we need. Expanding background checks to cover nearly all gun sales, including at gun shows and online sales. Getting rid of the loophole that allows a gun sale to go through after 3 business days, even if the background check has not been completed. And the House is planning even more action next week. Safe storage requirements, the banning of high-capacity magazines, raising the age to buy an assault weapon to 21, federal red flag law, codifying my ban on ghost guns that don't have serial numbers and can't be traced, and tougher laws to prevent gun trafficking and straw purchases. This time, we have to take the time to do something. And this time, it's time for the Senate to do something. But as we know, in order to get anything done in the Senate, we need a minimum of 10 Republican senators. I support the bipartisan efforts that include a small group of Democrats and Republican senators trying to find a way. But my God, the fact that the majority of the Senate Republicans don't want any of these proposals even to be debated or come up for a vote, I find unconscionable. We can't fail the American people again. Since Uvalde, just over a week ago, there have been 20 other mass shootings in America, each with 4 or more people killed or injured, including yesterday at a hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A shooter deliberately targeted a surgeon using an assault weapon he bought just a few hours before his rampage that left a surgeon, another doctor, a receptionist, and a patient dead and many more injured. That doesn't count the carnage we see every single day. It doesn't make the headlines. I've been in this fight for a long time. I know how hard it is, but I'll never give up. And if Congress fails, I believe this time a majority of the American people won't give up either. I believe the majority of you will act to turn your outrage into making this issue central to your vote. Enough, enough, enough. Over the next 17 days, the families in Uvalde will continue burying their dead. It will take that long in part because it's a town where everyone knows everyone. And day by day, they will honor each one they lost. Jill and I met with the owner and staff of the funeral home as being strong to take care of their own. And the people of Uvalde mourn as they do over the next 17 days. What will we be doing as a nation? Jill and I met with the sister of the teacher who was murdered and whose husband died of a heart attack 2 days later, leaving behind 4 beautiful orphan children, all now orphaned. The sister asked us, what could she say? What could she tell her nieces and nephews? It's the most heartbreaking moments that I can remember. All I could think to say was, I told her to hold them tight. Hold them tight. After visiting the school, we attended Mass at Sacred Heart Catholic Church with Father Eddie. In the pews, families and friends held each other tightly. As Archbishop Gustavo spoke, he asked the children in attendance to come up on the altar and sit in the altar with him as he spoke. There wasn't enough room, So Mom and her young son sat next to Jill and me in the first pew. And as we left the church, a grandmother who had just lost her granddaughter passed me a handwritten letter. It read, quote, "Erase the invisible line that is dividing our nation. Come up with a solution and fix what's broken and make the changes that are necessary to prevent this from happening again." End of quote. My fellow Americans, enough. Enough. It's time for each of us to do our part. It's time to act for the children we've lost, for the children we can save, for the nation we love. Let's hear the call and the cry. Let's meet the moment. Let us finally do something. God bless the families who are hurting. God bless you all. From a hymn based on the 91st Psalm sung in my church. May He raise you up on eagle's wings and bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun and hold you in the palm of His hand. That's my prayer for all of you. God bless you.
It's fine. Another day in paradise here.
So, what do you think would happen today?
Let me just make a statement here, if I may. On Tuesday, in this courtroom right here, I filed a civil suit against the Kangaroo Committee on the Hill, 7 partisan Democrats, 2 Rhino Republicans. The essence of that civil suit was that the subpoenas issued by the committee are ultra-virus, unlawful, and unenforceable. And I made that case based on 4 legal arguments. The first is that this committee is neither duly authorized nor properly constituted, meaning that it doesn't follow the rules of either the House itself or the committee's own authorizing resolution. I would refer you to the civil suit, but it's HRes 8 and HRes 1037. I am not the only one who has filed to question the validity of that Kangaroo Committee. Nancy Pelosi herself calls that committee unprecedented, and she's absolutely right. The second point, and by the way, my book, Taking Back Trump's America, I need everybody in America to buy that book on Amazon today. That is for two reasons. One is that's going to be my legal defense fund, because these people are coming at me hard. Number two, that book is about why we need to take the House of Representatives back from the kangaroos on Capitol Hill. The second case, part of the civil case, is simply that over a 5-year period, Congress has weaponized the investigatory powers of Congress in a way which is unconstitutional. The people of America need to understand Congress has the right to investigate, but only for non-punitive legislative purposes. What that kangaroo committee is doing right now is investigating for punitive purposes. They're essentially acting as judge, jury, and executioner. Their mission, their clear mission, is to prevent Donald John Trump from running for president in 2024 and being elected for president. And people like me are in their way, and they're not coming for me and Trump, they're coming for you. All 74 million of you who voted for Donald John Trump. Hang on, I'm not finished. You need to do your homework. Read that. That case went out, every one of you. I bet there isn't a single person in here who read that whole case. The third issue is that the Constitution is a prohibition against what's called bills of attainders. Okay? This is bills against undue punishment of citizens of this country. Today, the punishment which was inflicted on a man presumed innocent and innocent until proven guilty demonstrates the utter disregard for the Constitution and the law that the Department of Justice has. I sent them a letter on Wednesday offering a modus vivendi. I told them contact an individual who would discuss this matter. What did they do? They didn't call me. I spoke to the FBI agent who'd arrested me. I spoke to him Wednesday night. I said, Walter, whatever you need. You don't have to come banging on my door like you did last week getting me out of bed. I'm here to cooperate. Okay? What did they do? Right? I was on my way to Nashville today to do a TV appearance with Mike Huckabee's show. Right? And instead of coming to my door where I live, which, by the way, is right next to the FBI, instead of calling me and say, hey, we need you down at court, we've got a warrant for you, I would have gladly come. What did they do? They intercepted me getting on the plane. And then they put me in handcuffs. They bring me here. They put me in leg irons. They stick me in a cell. By the way, just historical note, I was in John Hinckley's cell. They seem to think that that was like an important historical note. Okay? That's punitive. What they did to me today violated the Constitution. In my lawsuit, I discussed going back to Nixon, GSA, and other cases, that what this government is supposed to do when they have an issue such as they've had, and this is not the first rodeo they've had plenty of people question the validity of their subpoenas. What they're supposed to do is take the least burdensome alternative. I told them, go negotiate with Donald John Trump and his attorneys, because I'm in an untenable constitutional position. There's no settled law on this. There's no settled law. And by the way, the law leans squarely towards my right to senior testimonial immunity and President Trump's right to executive privilege. What did they do? They didn't negotiate with the president, as I asked them. That would have been the least burdensome. They didn't file a civil suit like they did with Mears and Bolton back in the Bush administration when they didn't control the Justice Department. What did they do? They just came with the full force of the federal government and put the hammer down, trying to intimidate me.
Peter.
All right, now hang on.
You complain.
One last thing. One last thing. I have represented myself pro se in this matter because part of the Democrats' strategy is to engage in what is called lawfare, which is to say to use the legal system for effectively coercion and illicit ends. I do not want to spend several $100,000 on lawyers. But the reason why I'm here, and this is not about me, folks, not about me here. This is about a constitutional principle that is important to effective presidential decision making, and what the Justice Department is doing is wrong on all manner of counts. All right, let me stop here. Now let me warn you here. I'm not going to answer any questions pertaining to the case because with this indictment and arrest, I can't speak specifically about legal matters. So I'm warning you on that, okay?
Peter,
and if I get questions to that, I'm going to have to just find my way to my home. Yes, ma'am.
Are you willing to go behind bars over this? And is there any chance that you would cooperate with the committee?
I made it very clear that the least burdensome path for the committee and what was required by case law, settled case law, is for them to first go and negotiate executive privilege and testimonial immunity with President Trump. They did not do that. What they did was they colluded with the White House to have Joe Biden engage in the fanciful and absurd notion that somehow a sitting incumbent could strip his predecessor of executive privilege and me of testimonial immunity. It does not fly. So that is an important principle that I think lays partly at the heart of this case. So let's, as the boss likes to say, let's see what happens going forward. But I have on Wednesday, I reached out to the Justice Department and I offered them a possible way forward, a modus vivendi. They responded with effectively the same kind of thing you'd see in Stalinist Russia or the Chinese Communist Party. And I note, interestingly, for the record, that the only two people who have been indicted on criminal charges are me and Stephen K. Bannon, and we're also one of the few people in this world that have been sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party. This government is acting like an authoritarian government, whether it's vax mandates or this case or anything in between.
Peter,
yes, sir.
So you complained last week.
You were in the court.
Yes, I was
You
in
heard
court.
what I had to
I was
say.
in court
You
and I
can
heard
report on that.
One of the things you complained about was the fact that they came to your door last Thursday to present the subpoena. So today they didn't come to your door. They met you at the airport. So I'm just trying to make sure.
As I said, on Wednesday, I said, look, to Walter Giordano, it's like, Walter, I'm here. You don't have to bang on my door in the early morning. I'll take whatever subpoena you want. I let them know that at the Justice Department. There was no reason on God's good earth for what they did today to an American citizen. That did not have to happen. It's terrorism, it's coercion. There's no excuse for what they did today, and America needs to know this. And I want to, again, taking back Trump's America, buy on Amazon. I need that out to the public. That's the blueprint for taking back the Congress from Pelosi's terrorists and the White House from Joe Biden. Yeah.
Mr. Navarro, you mentioned
Who are you from?
On the Fox. You mentioned that you've invoked former President Trump multiple times. Have you spoken to him about your legal decision?
I don't talk about my discussions with President Trump ever. Next question.
And a follow-up. Do you feel that if you had been cooperating with the committee at any point that you wouldn't be in this predicament that you're following yourself right now?
The committee is an unlawful committee that does not abide by its own authorization or its own procedures. I mean, look, here's the thing. Reporters, like, the best reporting that's come out on this wasn't from an American. It was from the Daily Mail. Why is that? Okay? But if you do your homework on this, and it's all in my civil suit, HRES 8, which is a general authorizing resolution of this Congress, says that in order for a committee to issue subpoenas, they have to have a ranking minority member. Full stop. Full stop. The authorizing resolution for this committee says it has to have a ranking minority member to issue subpoenas. Guess what? Nancy Pelosi refused to place not only a ranking minority member on that committee, she refused to put the other 4 people that Kevin McCarthy put forward to her. Instead, without his consultation, another violation of the rules, she put on Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who I argue in the civil suit obviously have score settling and axes to grind. These are ultra vires, unenforceable, unlawful subpoenas, and that committee should never have been formed. I blame, as much as I blame Pelosi and Schiff and Raskin, I also blame Kevin McCarthy. He knew right at the outset that they were breaking the rules, and he didn't stand up right then. And shame on Kevin McCarthy. Now he's got his own subpoena. It'd be interesting to see whether they hold him in contempt, whether he winds up over here. I doubt it. What is this? Interesting. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Do you expect your arraignment to be delayed past June 17th?
Say again?
Do you expect your arraignment to be delayed past June 17th?
That's going to be a legal question. If you were sitting there, you understood my arguments. I do believe, as I stated in the courtroom, that this was a preemptive strike by the Department of Justice to prevent my civil suit from going forward, and shame on them. And the evidence of that is simply, I filed that civil suit on Tuesday. I sent them communication on Wednesday trying to offer some kind of modus vivendi, and instead of responding to that, instead of having the FBI agent call cordially and ask me to come down and go through this, whatever it is, they didn't do that. They just put the hammer down, and no American citizen should have to go through what I went through today, who is trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to do my duty to this country. I'm in an untenable position. The Constitution is on my side on this, and I'm just trying to hold that ground. And I'm up against partisans who want to weaponize Congress and abuse the tools of the federal government. Who else? Anybody else?
When they came to your house on Wednesday, the FBI, what was that? What was that?
It wasn't Wednesday. That was last week. They were delivering a subpoena to have me. It's a very interesting subpoena because they were commanding me to submit documents to the grand jury, grand jury 22-3 to be exact. And they weren't compelling my testimony. They weren't commanding me to come and testify. They were simply commanding me to deliver documents. And the untenable constitutional position we have here, and there's a whole lot of other issues with those subpoenas, is I have testimonial immunity, and the president, there's Trump executive privilege. It's it's a very interesting legal case. And look, my mission here is to get this to the Supreme Court so that they can resolve the key issues here. I think the biggest issue is whether an incumbent president can strip a predecessor of executive privilege. I mean, look, please understand this. If that happens, if the courts allow that to stand, the Justice Department gets away with that, that'll essentially kill the institution of executive privilege as we know it. And it exists dating back to the days of George Washington for a very, very, very good reason, which is to allow candor from people like me sitting in places like the Oval Office so that a president can make effective and informed and optimal decision-making. Anyway, I'm going to take one last question. Hang on. Do me a favor, okay? It's been a long day. I'm going to take one last question. Do me the courtesy when I leave here, because I've been generous with my time and I've got nothing more to say. Just let me walk out of here and behave in a civil manner. So I'll take one last question. Yeah, go ahead.
You're an economist. Is it wise to be representing yourself?
Have you read my case?
I have.
So what did I say in my case about that?
I'm curious to hear it from you.
What did I say in my case about that? This is what we do in Professor Land. You said you read my case. You asked me a question. What did I say about me representing myself?
And I'm not here to repeat back what was based on.
Okay. Any other questions?
I didn't read your case
One more.
memo. Why are you representing yourself? Do you think it's a good idea?
I'm representing myself pro se because I do not want to be dragged down into the muck of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of my retirement savings on this kind of venture. I'm going to evaluate my legal strategy in light of what has happened with this, and there'll be more to follow. But if you would please, don't scream at me when I stop. Don't follow me. Just let me walk home, and I would much appreciate that. It's been a long day. I've been generous with my time. God bless America. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Please have a seat. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Suarez, for your introduction, for your work. It is good to see you again. You have been an extraordinary leader, not only for your city, but in our country. So thank you. Mayor Shivi, thank you for hosting us. It is so good to be back in Reno. And to everyone, it is my honor to be with you this afternoon. You, our mayors, you are leaders, not only for the constituents that elected you, but I think if it weren't clear before the last couple of years, it is clear to everyone now, you are not only local leaders, you are national leaders who show such courage, conviction, and fortitude during some of the most difficult times. And so I'm here most of all to thank you all for what you do, what you have been doing, and what you are committed to do. As many of you probably know, I spent the first 20 years of my career in local government, and throughout the years, I have partnered with mayors in every public office I've held, From my time as the elected district attorney of San Francisco, to being Attorney General of California and a United States Senator, and now, of course, as Vice President. In fact, since first becoming Vice President a little over a year ago, I have met with, as I have counted it roughly, so far I've met with nearly 60 mayors. All that to say, I know what you all do, and I know how important it is. And I know how personal it is. As a mayor, your work does not stop at the end of the day when you walk out of City Hall. Your work is full-time. It finds you at the grocery store. I know. When a retiree may come up to you to tell you about that street light that's out on his block. I know. Your work finds you at your child or your grandchild's basketball game, when the assistant coach wants to know when his neighborhood is getting high-speed internet. Your work finds you at your place of worship when a young mother will ask you how to get guns out of the wrong hands. People look to you to solve problems. And because you are so present where you work and lead, you often have the experience of people literally searching your eyes to figure out if everything's going to be okay. Even when sometimes you may not be sure. But you still keep getting up and getting out there and making it work. And that is why President Joe Biden and I are honored to partner with America's mayors to continue to build our nation. When we took office, as many of you remember, our economy and the pandemic, well, things weren't looking good. In fact, in many ways heading in the wrong direction. But our administration worked with you to get our country back on track. We worked together to help millions of people who at the time were facing eviction to stay in their homes. We worked together to make sure families had enough food to eat. We worked together to help small businesses stay open or reopen their doors and retain their employees. And because of our work together, since the President and I took office, we have seen record job creation, record declines in unemployment, and a record increase in labor participation. Just yesterday, in fact, we learned that the long-term health of our Medicare and Social Security programs is stronger than it was a year ago. And of course, the jobs report that came out today proves that we continue to move in the right direction. Last month alone, we added 390,000 jobs, which is tremendous progress. And happening as we see a shift from recovery to sustainable economic growth. Altogether, we have created nearly 9 million new jobs since taking office, which is a record-setting pace of job creation. Unemployment is down to 3.6%, and small business creation is growing at an historic rate, which means, of course, at a local level, more folks are starting a new business in your community than ever before. The backstory on this is that within our first month in office, many of you will remember the President and I asked you all to meet with us. And to meet with us in the White House, it was virtual, but it was a meeting in the White House. You were there. And we asked you, There was a reason for that meeting, and those meetings, because there were many. We asked you what you needed. Because, you see, as many of you know, the President and I, as I said, I did, and he also started at local government. So we know you all you've got your finger on the pulse. You're right there on the ground. So we knew you, our mayors, were some of the folks that could be most informative and helpful to us to ensure that we would do the right thing. And through those meetings, you told us exactly what it would take to help your communities get through the pandemic. The result of that, and that work together, that partnership, was the American Rescue Plan. The ARP, I'm spending time in D.C., we now got a lot of acronyms, so I'm going to say ARP, but it's the American Rescue Plan. One of the things that we talked about with you, and we knew has, in many policy initiatives, been an issue, and we needed to deal with it. The ARP dealt with one of these issues, which is the need to make sure there would be direct funding to cities. So we did that. And we did that because we also knew why it is important. It is important because then you all, at a local level, could put that money to work immediately, which you did, because after the ARP passed, you used this money to get people vaccinated. You used it to support frontline workers, to keep small businesses open, to address crime and keep communities safe, to reopen schools so that children could return to the classroom and parents could return to work. None of this would have happened without your work to craft and implement the ARP.